Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4312-400-652. This is a single acting spring hinge, full mortise, residential weight, lube bearing steel base, satin chrome plated. Get a good look at it there. UL listed for fire door applications, rated for 1,000,000 cycles. It's non-handed, self-lubricating bearings, easily adjustable spring tension, ANSI template pattern screw holes. We'll go over more of that in a moment. Pivot point aligns with residential butt hinges. We'll talk about that in a moment. 5/8 radius, corners, etc. Let's dissect the part number. LB means lube bearing. It's a maintenance-free, sort of concealed, self-lubricating bearing construction specific to Bommer. 4312 means that this hinge is a standard residential spring hinge, or a standard hinge, meaning that the screw hole locations are in the regular standard common pattern called a template pattern, meaning they're not what some people call zigzag or made for a specific door manufacturer like Republic or Castlegate or Peachtree. They are 5/8 radius corners, which are very common in residential applications. Okay. The 400 in the part number means that this is a 4-inch tall by 4-inch wide hinge. The height is first, then the width, 4x4. In 652, that means two things. That means that it is a steel-based hinge, but that it is in a satin chrome finish. Okay, typical satin chrome finish, available in all of the common finishes. Your chromes polished in satin, in chrome, bronze, brass, nickel, oil rubbed, zinc, black, japanned, prime coat. You can get all these finishes by changing those last 3 letters. If you need help determining that, let us know. Being a LB4312 by Bommer, we said earlier, it's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaf here that the hinges are meant to be flush when mortised. They're intended to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame when the leaves are brought parallel. Okay, typical common thing. The 5/8 radius is a giveaway that it's a residential wood door application. The pre-hanger, the door supplier, the door mill worker, they will use an 1.25" diameter bit in their machine or their router, and leaving the 5/8 radius is significantly less labor, because they can make this prep in sometimes just 1 pass of the router, or 2 at the most, and then they don't have to come back and square those corners out. That's why 5/8 radius is so common. The fact that it's a spring hinge tells me a couple of things. It could certainly be a fire-rated door in a residential application. You might have an attached garage, and that door is supposed to be fire-rated, 20-minute. It needs to be self-closing. Or could just be that same garage door or the back door of the house, and the owner wants the door to be closed. We don't want to heat the outside of the house. Kids, speaking from experience, leave the doors open. Spring hinge, perfectly suited for that. The fact that it's 4x4 tells me that it's probably an 1.75" door. That would be appropriate for that. Now, there is a link below this video called Template, which shows everything important dimensionally about the hinge that we've not covered, which is a lot. Not much of it is super important. Well, all of it's pretty important. First of all, the leaf thickness, 96 thousandths, that's really important to know. That's considered residential grade rather than commercial grade, typical for residential applications. Gives you a couple of other dimensions that are less critical, but if you're not sure if these screw holes will line up with your existing prep, that template will show you precisely where these are laid out, and you can verify that against what you're working with. We'll move on from here. There's a link below this video to the installation instructions as well. And if your hinges come in a box, and they might, they're probably printed on the back of it as well. But if they don't, that link will help you with the installation instructions, but let's go about that now. There is a guide below this video to the limitations, the engineered specifications of the hinge in terms of usage. First of all, dealing with doors up to 3 foot by 7 foot. No bigger than that. Got an 85-pound door, they want 2 spring hinges. If you've got a 110-pound door, they say go with 3 spring hinges. The comment earlier about pivot point aligns with residential butt hinges. This vertical axis of pivoting is compatible with a typical residential 4x4 hinge, is what the deal is. So you could use 1 hinge and 2 regular ones if it was a very light door, or most commonly 2 hinges and a regular hinge, or, in my opinion, all 3 hinges. We'll get to that in a moment. Spring hinges will always be at the top, then the middle, and lastly the bottom. Some people put them on the bottom of the door. They're best served by being up at the top, getting the door closed. The comment about all spring hinges, it's not because of the obvious reason why I would want that. It's because, primarily, having installed these over years, maintained them, reset them, adjusted them, I have learned that having more spring hinges attached to the door than less gives you a more predictable, reliable sort of operation. The spring hinge is, in my opinion, a pretty inefficient way to handle a door, and that really doors need to be hydraulically controlled. Door closers, surface-mounted door closers, overhead or floor-mounted door closers. However, that's not practical in a lot of applications, and you could have a condo building where you've got 90 units, and the front of all those doors, the unit doors, they're not going to have door closers on them. They're going to have spring hinges. So that's an application where a spring hinge would be appropriate, because those doors would always be, or most typically be, fire rated. So as you set the tension on the spring hinge, and we'll go over that in a moment, and the door opens up, the spring hinge has got to get the door from actually a negative action of being opened, stopping it, then getting it moving through the closing cycle, overcoming all that air pressure resistance, building up enough inertia in the door to get it moving as well, but also overcoming the friction of the latch bolt hitting the strike plate to get it to latch. And I have found that when you've got 1 spring hinge when you needed 2, or 2 when you should have had 3, you can get the door kind of moving closed, but if you're really underpowered, all you're doing is hoping to build enough inertia so that it'll hopefully get all the way to a closed position. It's not a reliable way to close a door, especially if it's fire rated. It will fail an inspection test. So I have found when you've got plenty of spring power on reserve, you can set the tension better across your spring hinges so that you're not overtaxing any one of them. You can have enough residual spring stored energy in the spring when you get down to the critical last few degrees of the door closing. It's like a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And that's like having torque in this reserve spring power, and that's where I find the best amount of success. Also, the seasons change. Windows will be open on the back of the condo building, and you've got these on the front door. Well, that door is going to rip closed. But then when the winter comes, you've got to readjust it. And when you're underpowered in the spring tension, you've got a lot less ability to keep the door controlled. Now, moving on, speaking of those holes before, screws are included. In a complementary finish, you're going to get machine screws and wood screws. Generally, you're going to find all machine screws and half wood screws. This package that I'm looking at here has 8 of each, so you're going to be covered regardless of what you're installing it to, metal or wood, wood, metal, metal, wood, metal kind of thing. Although a metal frame would be, well, if you had a residential sort of, thin gauge steel frame with a snap-on trim, you might encounter this. Setting the spring tension. Now, with every order, you're going to get a tension rod, and then with every hinge that you buy or order, you're going to get a tension pin. This order happens to have 2 on it, so there's 2 tension pins. When installing the hinge, you'll install it with this tension collar pointed towards the top of the door. Okay, there's not one here, just here. You'll insert the tension rod into one of the holes and turn it clockwise. And as you do that, you reveal new additional holes in that tension collar. And then that's where you stick one of the pins. No more than 3 holes is what they recommend, and that's how you'll set the tension. Otherwise, this is just a normal hinge. some customers say, you know, I can't find that hinge in just a regular hinge, but I only need 2 spring hinges, and you know, I buy a 3rd spring hinge. Don't set the tension on it if you don't need it. It will work and look very, very well. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo. And right above it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer number LB4312-400-652 single acting spring hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us.